couple of them, haven't you?
Yeah, there. It started now. There was a Guru Viking episode number 20
Yeah.
where he asked me some of the stuff about what happened long time ago, and so I don't think that this part of the story was in what I told him, but basically I left Goenka feeling like he wasn't teaching enough, that there was something missing, not just in my own practice, but in the way that they were teaching. There was something missing. That was the strong feeling that I got. And I think fairly soon after that, I wound up in Bodh Gaya.
That's India, is it?
In India, right. But you see, Goenka was in Igatpuri, which is in Maharashtra state, kind of halfway or a bit between Bombay and Delhi, to where Bodh Gaya is much closer to Calcutta. That would be the largest city, or Varanasi would be another city in that vicinity. Actually, closer to Varanasi. So I don't know if you've been to India. I mentioned 4 cities, so I don't know if you know this area.
No, I mean, I think I flew into Calcutta, was in the airport, but I kind of went down I guess it would be down the sort of west coast. So I did a yoga retreat in Tamil Nadu, and then kind of went up to Goa, and then kind of went down Kerala, like Cochin, Barkala, down South Point, Srivandram, and then back up to. Then I was sort of running out of money. Went back up to Mumbai. Got lost in the city. Had a bit of a scary kind of incident. Well, you know what? I've got 1 week left. I'm going to go back down to Goa and just chill out for a week rather than dealing with corrupt policemen and all this kind of thing. So.
Okay, well, there's over in the Calcutta area, another city in that vicinity is Patna. And it's also one of the main kind of tourist backpackers way of getting into Nepal.
Right, yeah. So the north, sort of north, yeah.
Yeah. So we're in north.
Yeah, never went
north. Northeast India area.
Yeah.
Varanasi, and this is the area that the Buddha hung out in, and in fact, his birthplace and the area that he actually was born would now be in modern-day Nepal.
Really? Okay.
And that also he was friends with the kings in the more southern areas in King Pasadi and I forgot his name. I'll think of it in a moment. Bimbisara. And so that was the area that he lived in, and the idea then that there are 4 sacred places. The place where he was born, the place that he died, the enlightenment place, and the place that he first taught the Dhamma. And so all of those are in that whole vicinity there. That Bodh Gaya is the place where he became enlightened. And that's also the area where they were practicing heavy austerities. Naturally, if he goes to the very best austerity master in India, that's where he's going to give it up, is when he was there. And so that's the area of Brahmanism and austerities and a lot of stuff like that. And the Deer Park at Istitanya is where he gave the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. He also was in Varanasi, and he had a lot of followers in Varanasi, including Anthropithika, who was a kind of a banker of the day, and he was the one who was he was the money bags. And he bought property from one of the princes to make a grove in that area for the monks to stay in. Okay. So anyway, that's where I was in Bodh Gaya and Varanasi and Isatanya, but I was hanging out mostly in Bodh Gaya, reading the Visuddhimagga.
Okay.
And I did a course with Christopher Titmus there.
Oh, really?
I think that was in December of 2000, 1983, or was it 2082? Something like that. I think it's 83. I did it. Yeah, because uh, shortly after that, I met a monk there at that temple. I was at Wat Thai Bodh Gaya, and that's where I met this monk who actually we had many conversations. He spoke fairly good English, and one day he caught me with the Visuddhimagga, and he actually took it away from me.
What, took it off you? Like,
He took it off of me. Right here I am. I'm trying to quote to him out of the Visuddhimagga, and he takes it away from me, folds it up, and kind of half throws it over onto the bed. And that's when he started deeper introductions to me about Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, that I got to go to Thailand. This is where I found out about Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. It was in Bodh Gaya.
Christopher Titmus talks about Buddhadasa. I think he studied with Buddhadasa as well.
He did too, yes. In fact, he was, but it it took a while to click in. I think that Christopher is a much more subtle teacher. But the reason that I teach the way that I do is because of conversations I've had with Achan Po, that not to teach Buddhism in two steps, in the mundane and the supermundane, and guide students part of the way through the mundane and then take them into the supermundane, which is the way for ordinary people. That because of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, Achan Po said, no, the right way to do it is take the supermundane right from the very beginning. Let's teach the real teachings of the Buddha as if the people were actually ready for it. It's time to let the cat out of the bag, basically, which is what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa did. There's a very, very interesting story about what happened to him in the 1930s. Was that he was a Pali scholar in Bangkok, going through the various. They've got 9 levels of Pali studies, and I think he was like study number 6 or something like that. And so he was also doing public speaking. I think he had been a monk about 10 years by then. And that one group of excuse me, one group of lessons that he was giving had too many people in the audience who did not like what he was saying. I guess you could call them rebirthers, hardcore rebirthers. And so they made a stir. And the stir got to the point that it became what is called a Sangha Dasesa, which is an accusation that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is trying to destroy or to tear apart the Sangha, a very, very severe act within the Sangha, that the whole idea of the Sangha is it should be unified, and here he is doing things that's trying to destroy the Sangha.
Like a heretic.
He's a heretic, right? A heretic, exactly.
Heretic.
And so,
pain in the ass, like
a big one, a very, very big one. And as you can see, that if you could keep the people believing, like sheeple, that they are making merit by building temples and feeding the monks, that they'll continue to do so. That was the fear, that if the real noble Dhamma came out, people would stop being generous for the wrong reasons. The reality is that when people begin to hear the truth, they become generous for the right reasons.
For the sake of it, yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh. Many times students ask if they can pay me, and I won't let them
Yeah.
because I've got better plans. Get them hooked.
Yeah.
So that they'll go and spread the Dhamma. And so um, this is how it goes, is the Dhamma should be freely given. And even a subtle manipulation, like, oh, if you feed the monks, you'll have a better life next life, is like a built-in scam or promise.
Yeah.
And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa didn't like the feeling of that. But because of historical circumstances, the nobility of the Dhamma was not lost, wasn't ever lost, wasn't lost in Burma, wasn't lost in Sri Lanka. It was only lost in India because everything was lost in India. But the nobility was always there in the sense that it was nobles who brought Buddhism to Thailand. Therefore, the nobility is going to be implanted there, as well as all of the formalities of the surface level of Buddhism, plus all of the beliefs that the people already had. So if the people already believed in reincarnation, the nobles are not going to try to beat it out of them. And that's why the nobility, the nobles, and the ordinary people lived side by side, or let us say within the Sangha. So some of the Sangha was noble and some of it was not, but they were still monks for many, many years. They just never did quite figure out that, hey, they can give up their beliefs and be happy instead.
Yeah. But it was kind of a necessary vehicle.
Mm-hmm. So actually, you could say then that magical thinking is necessary to get us started, but it's like the booster, the first primary stage rockets, putting a spacecraft up. That you need that really, really heavy energy to get this thing off into the air. But once you get up, you get into flight, you can jettison all of the crap and get on with the show with a primary rocket.
Yeah. Which
Okay.
was the whole point originally.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so magical thinking around the Dhamma is what gets people launched into the Dhamma, but then they have, in order to go into the outer space of the noble existence, they have to jettison all of those old beliefs.
Because it's about the reality, which is now, as opposed to.
Exactly. But you see, you can think of it in three stages. And and two of the stages can be thought of as the same predicament. Okay, let us actually, for just description's sake, put those in with the labels of atheist and Christians, just for discussion purposes. Okay, because it also happens within Buddhism, but it's a little more difficult to see. In Christianity, they say that the soul goes on, that it is strong enough to survive death and a good deal after that, but it's still not on its own because it's really nothing but a football for God to kick around. And so you got to suck up to God to get him to treat you well. Okay? So,
And
the atheist...
So I was just going to say, isn't it built in a way? There's a kind of, the more you suffer in this life, the kind of better, really. You know what I mean? You're proving your worth. You kind of,
Exactly so. When you do all of the work that you've got to do, when you suffer enough, then you can get forgiveness, or you'll finally get paid or something.
There's a kind of pride in that suffering that you're. Yeah.
That's the law of karma.
And
You do good, you'll get good results. You do bad, you'll get bad results. No matter how long it takes, you'll get caught up with. So they say. And yet, look at how many wealthy people got their wealth and keep their wealth by dirty dealing and shenanigans and manipulating politicians, and
but that's on the mundane level, isn't it? You could, if you view it from,
it's on every level.
so if you
Or
view
that,
how they probably don't,
but you're right. You are right.
they don't sleep at night, and they don't, you know.
Yes, I'm just using that as an example. So
Sorry.
To go into the mundane level means that we can assume that the student has already come far enough that they're ready to jettison that baggage anyway. So, back to the idea of an atheist. Very few Christians are going to come talk to me on Skype and argue with me about and whatnot. There's no reason for them to do that. So those that are believing in eternalism are not the issue. The ones who believe that there is a soul that goes on and on.
Is that eternalism? Is that what it means?
Right, that is eternalism, okay? And in fact, there's two kinds of eternalism. Absolute eternalism means it keeps going on and keeps going on, and a trillion years after that, it keeps going on.
Okay.
And then there's the idea of eternalism that after trillions of years, eventually it will stop. But that time is so far into the future that the result is the same as if it were eternalism. So eternalism and semi-eternalism are often bagged the same way, in the sense that there is something that keeps going on and on and on.
I've seen this in various teachings that I've looked into in our sort of gap, like yoga teachings and sort of occult teachings and all sorts of stuff. It's
Okay, now let's contrast that to the second kind, which we will call atheist. And the atheists have the kind of belief is like that the existing being upon the breakup and death of the body is annihilated. This is annihilationism. That yes, here I am, I'm a human being, I thump my chest and I work at my job and all of that, but when I die, I'm dead. Now, both of those miss the point of the Buddhist teaching. So both eternalism, semi-eternalism, and annihilationism miss the point of the teaching of the Buddha. The third one is nihilism, and nihilism is absolutely against the teaching of the Buddha, and even the nihilists know that.
how you defining so nihilism would be what, like
nihilism would be like, oh, I can get away with anything. There is no karma, there is no result of anything, there's no mother, no father, I can go do what I damn well please and I can get away with it.
Yeah, I kind of thought it was like there's no meaning inherent.
There's no meaning either.
Yeah.
I can go do what I want to do. There's no meaning. And in fact, because there's no meaning, I can go do what I want to do to try to find meaning, and I still don't find any meaning, and so I'm miserable, but I'm going to do what I want to do anyway.
I mean, maybe if you were a psychopath and you had no kind of remorse.
That's exactly it. That's psychopath, okay? Or you could think of it as very, very primitive times in a truly dog-eat-dog, totally competitive world where even the warlord is going to get knocked off by his lieutenants.
Just survival, just pure.
Right, just raw survival.
Yeah.
Because if everybody's out just, I'm going to do anything I want to do, and if you stand in my way, you're dead.
Yeah. There are strands of that, obviously, you can see.
Mm-hmm. And so, in fact, you could say that our civilization grew out of that. The civilization grew out of that. How did civilization grow out of that? It didn't grow out of it with pure wisdom. It grew out of it with retributions of punishment of you do bad behavior, the whole crowd's going to come after you.
It's a bit like this, like nuclear deterrent, I guess, where every country's got nuclear warheads, and it kind of keeps the peace because
exactly.
if China fires one,
Mm-hmm.
America's going to fire one, and then we all blow ourselves up, and then kind of it's all
Exactly, which means mutual assured destructions means, guess what? Nobody gets away with it.
Yeah.
Now that is what the Buddha would call ordinary right view. An ordinary right view encompasses both annihilationism and eternalism and semi-eternalism. Ordinary right view, which basically means is that you will get punished for what you do wrong, which means that you can teach that to children, whether it's a secular household or whether it's a religious household. The religious household just adds the no matter what and adds hell as an example of no matter what. But secular people do the same thing with their kids. They try to teach them between right and wrong. And not only that, but they seem to learn it better. If you look at the statistics in the United States, county by county, those counties which are highly religious are very, very low in morality, in the sense of there is more domestic violence, more alcoholism, more psychotherapy problems, more social issues, in the
religious family.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
In religious counties, the morality, according to the statistics, is lower, and in counties that are atheist or have very low church membership, generally have fewer deaths, fewer murders, fewer break-ins, fewer domestic violence, less alcoholism, less drug abuse.
What's the do you know the reasons or?
Because the kids believed what the parents told them, that hey, the cop's going to come after you if you do that.
Common sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
But where the kids are told about hell, some of them believe it, and many of them don't. They all believe in forgiveness. Oh, I've got a get out of hell free card here. Yeah. I'm a Christian.
God loves me. It's all right.
Yeah, I can go do what I want to, and God will forgive me. Get out of hell free card. And you can see where then Christianity and other religions, the morality spirals downward, not upward.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas, like in a non-religious family, the parents saying, "Look, if you misbehave, you're going to get a slap." You know what I mean? And so that's a actual. The kid can understand that sort of,
Okay. So getting back then to the teachings of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, in Thailand, there are already a lot of people who are Buddhist who did not believe in rebirth anyhow. Just like there's a large number of atheists in the United States that don't believe in the afterlife that the Christians talk about. Which means that those are the ones that are primed for the noble, because they've already got they can still live a life. They don't have to fall back into wrong view of all greed all the time. They actually become really interested in Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. That's why he's got such a mass following in Thailand. It's brilliant. But there was more to it than that, and that is that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was noted on both sides. Not only was he noted by those who were strongly holding and critical of people talking against rebirth and holding to that, but there were those who were also highly placed in Buddhism that knew that rebirth had nothing to do with the teachings of the Buddha. In short, there were already nobles in Thailand, some of them very, very highly and well placed. You could also go so far as to say that even the royal family of Thailand at one time was, let us say, akin to the nobles, friendly with the nobles, having nobles, noble monks. There was one monk who disrobed in order for himself to become king. He gave up his monkship to become a king, and he was dead within 2 years, and that made everybody reminisce about what the Buddha said.
What sort of time? What was that, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or?
No, this actually, he died in 1920. He disrobed in 1917. He was born in 1860. He was one of the 46 children of King Mongut.
24.
And when he was 8 years old, King Chulalonghorn became the king, and that they were good friends. And King Chulalonghorn really supported what this monk wanted to do in the Dhamma. And so they actually revolutionized the Dhamma by bringing much more of the wholesome part of the Dhamma in to the public thinking anyway.
Does this link slightly to what you mentioned in the Guru Viking, like a benign dictatorship in a way? You kind of...
That I was describing exactly the Thai government.
A wise... Oh,
up until the last generation.
kind of like you're being... The wise elders kind of have a strong influence and kind of make the rules because they can see it from a higher perspective, kind of what's good and good,
Mm-hmm.
really.
Yeah, so our best example of that benign dictator or benign king is King Bimbisara, who was the friend of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was friends with the royalty, but it comes from this Sangha Desesta the story I was about to tell you about, because he made some really good friends in there, and in fact picked up a very famous teacher. And that teacher actually went to visit Bhikkhu Buddhadasa at Wat Soen Mok. His name was Bhikkhu Buddha Gosajarn. Yeah, Bhikkhu Buddha Gosajarn. It was his name. And he was made some debt in 1920 by this very, or 17 by this very king. So that was the connection that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa had with the royal house already, was because his teacher, who was on that council in 1932, 33, something like that, when Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was put on trial. The results of that trial, by the way, came out is he's teaching the correct Dhamma.
He was put on trial. You mean like he was put on trial? You mean like
he was put on trial, a Sangha Desesa.
Like an actual court case in a way.
An actual court case of 20 monks. A Sangha Desesa required. Sorry, I should have pointed that out to you. Yes,
yeah.
He was put up on trial, but it was all the top monks in Bangkok, and some of them were noble and knew the noble Dhamma, and some of them were not, and they were the ones who. Okay, so part of the trial, which lasted for months and months and months, actually turned out to be a Pali literature search.
Right, Pali literature search.
Because they were, because this group here that was on the side of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa thought that, yeah, maybe now's the time to let's do this. And so there was an absolute literature research that actually started changing the way that the Thai monkhood at the top looked at things. And so they wound up with the verdict was, just to get along with the old guard, was that he was teaching the correct Dhamma to the wrong people.
Right.
Why? Because he was teaching it openly. And he continued his whole life to teach it openly. And the nobles that were supporting him, he became quite famous because of that. And many of them then wanted him to be their teacher.
It was kind of good, so, good publicity in a way.
It was such good publicity being on trial, and being accused, or not accused, but being sentenced to teaching the right Dhamma to the wrong people.
But that's going to draw out like maybe the rebels and the kind of people that kind of into that kind of.
This story gives me so much respect for Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, on top of the fact that I actually knew him in his old age.
Yeah.
And so this is the story then, that he is the one who said it is time to stop, how to say it, putting up with all of the belief systems that people have. If it's time for the Buddha Dhamma to become known worldwide, let's let the real show be known worldwide without having to take Asian stupidity and superstition along with it. Because there's so many Westerns that'll gobble that stuff right up. They came out of Christianity, but rebirth sounds like another ticket back into the afterlife.
Yeah.
Because you can think of it is that the afterlife sounds very delicious. It must be marvelous. If I enjoy being alive a little bit now, maybe I'll enjoy more being alive next time.
But it's taken away from now, isn't it?
And not only that, but the thought of death is the fear of death. Thinking about dying, nobody wants to die. Why do people want to die when we have this instinct called the self-preservation instincts, whose major job is to keep us alive and winds up being that which always gets woken up to put us in hell? That it's the waking up of this self-preservation, and it has many false positives. You could say that that's the self itself is when the self-preservation instinct pops into place. And when it pops into place, it almost always does with fear. That's the primary language of the self-preservation instinct, in the sense that things are dangerous right now. So if we can finally talk ourselves back into, hey man, things are not dangerous. I do not need that self or its preservation instinct to keep interfering with a wonderful life, because things are really not dangerous.
And the self-preservation instinct it hasn't got intelligence, as in a way it lashes out. It makes your life worse. Like, you could have a moment and end up in prison or whatever. And
that's right. People wind up in prison because of that momentary self-preservation instinct. They let it out.
It can be a strong feeling, though, can it? And it can take over. If you're not mindful, you're not on the ball.
Right. So in one flash, it can destroy a life or two or a bunch. But we can also see that in the small ways that it can pop up just for a short time, just enough to muck up this moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Doesn't have to muck up our whole lives and everybody's around us, but it can muck up a day.
But I guess that's kind of the question, isn't it? If you're not happy right now, that survival instinct is doing it. It's doing something, no matter how subtly.
Ta-da! Exactly right. If you're not happy right now,
something
that
going
means the self-preservation instinct is doing something in there.
But I guess through socialization that it can get more and more subtle. So I'm not gonna chop your head off, but I might have a little verbal dig and try to tear you down verbally, and then on another level, just like I said, gossip. It can get more and more refined, I guess. But at that core, it's the same. It's the same thing. You're trying to protect yourself.
Oh, okay. Now, what you're describing happens with everybody. You're talking about not just what you've observed in yourself, but you can extrapolate that with the teachings of the Buddha to recognize that that's very common.
The human condition, yeah.
It's a human condition, right? And that human condition is there with both the Christians who believe in a reincarnation and the Buddhists and Hindus and whatnot that believe in reincarnation and rebirth, and the atheists who don't believe in an afterlife. They still get caught, all of them, in that human condition that you're talking about.
I guess you could say the only difference between anyone like myself and someone on death row is maybe in certain moments I was better at controlling the survival instinct compared to the other guy. Or maybe the other guy had so much alcohol in his system
that he couldn't control himself. Exactly so. So if you can see it that way and begin to notice it, it is with sati, waking up and investigating what's going on more and more often, more and more clearly, then the less likely it is I'm going to allow the self-preservation instinct to spring into gear and take over. or even spring into gear and influence. Maybe not even take over, but it does sometimes influence our behavior.
I guess that's where you need
So
sharper and sharper levels of clarity.
that would be what would be called then nobility, is when the noble mind is the one that's sharp enough not to allow the instinct to influence the wisdom.
Yeah, I think sometimes in life
So
you come to this if you've come close to being really burnt, and cool. You said in that talk that I listened to last night with Guru Viking, it's sometimes you catch yourself halfway through. Sometimes it's kind of too late, and the optimum would be to catch it, that point of contact, so you don't go down that path at all. But sometimes you might catch yourself 30 seconds into it, sometimes 3 days into it, and sometimes 30 years into it, and you think, what have I done? Right, at that from that seed,
I'm
I guess
I'm proud of you
is
for remembering that, because that was one of the things that I would have liked to have gone over again several times to grind that in for people, and I only mentioned it one time, and you picked right up on it.
I feel like I'm coming to the Dharma again for you because it is. I can understand why people say like they're seeking refuge. It's you see the wisdom in the teaching, and you see the danger. You don't want to let the danger just ruin your enjoyment of life. But it's there, and it's you want to, and that's why I can see why you would dedicate maybe becoming a monk or something, because the opt-in conditions get this thing sorted out first.
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah.
Um, I was in the U.S. Navy, and because of that, I got several things ingrained the way that the Navy guys look at things. And when you use the word refuge, what springs to mind for me is a harbor, a safe harbor. Okay, like the world is actually the high seas. Where the other way of looking at it, no, you come ashore, you come back to the world when you're on the high seas. But when you're on the high seas, that's basically the world that the sailor wants to escape from. So he's looking for that safe harbor.
Yeah.
Okay, so that refuge or the safe harbor, the Dhamma, is really a safe harbor from the high seas of the mind, the heavy seas. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the wisdom to navigate, and to find the, to navigate and
Hmm.
in this world, because there's always going to be a better path of action uh,
Yeah.
than another one.
When I say high seas, I'm also talking about the wind and the rain and the storm. And there's a lot of storms in life when we're dealing with the world. And so that refuge or that safe harbor or getting out of the storm is, and then we recognize, wait a minute, when I sit down to meditation and I get away from all of that storm, I recognize I brought my own tempest. I've now got a tempest at a teapot.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
And when we recognize that's where the real storm is on the inside, now we recognize, oh, but we can still use the Dhamma for a refuge from even that storm.
yeah, it's just navigating the interior landscape, the
Hmm. So
interior.
that,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. So now we begin to manage the interior landscape so that we can stay away from our own storms.
and yeah, and we spoke about last time that when you can put a roadblock up in a highway just to stop a whole load of problems later down the road, just by one simple act.
Hmm.
Take a right instead of going over that bridge.
Exactly. To think of how much damage that you save and not have by putting your ship into safe harbor as opposed to leaving it out in the storm. If you leave your ship out in the storm, it's going to have a whole lot of damage and it's going to have a whole lot of work that you got to do to get it back repaired again. But you can bring it into safe harbor.
Yeah, and it might sound kind of exciting, but when you kind of lose a taste for that kind of hookah of adrenaline, you know, and you don't want to play the hero anymore. You kind
I
of
know. So that's part of growing up, isn't it? Because there's a part of us as kids that we like those high seas.
yeah. It's why I like sort of reading like thriller novels and kind of like about soldiers and all this kind of stuff. But in reality, you know, it doesn't feel very nice, does it? You know.
So, in that regard, it doesn't really matter. And that was the part that it was hard for me to get quite through to Steve on Guru Viking, was that since the storm of life that we're talking about happens to both the atheist and the Christian, then it doesn't matter what the Christian believes that's different than what the atheist believes. They both are caught in the storm.
Yeah. Maybe
so it doesn't matter for the Buddhist whether he believes in reincarnation or not. That's an irrelevant belief. The question is, can he come out of the storm right now?
Has he got the skill? The atheist might. The atheist might be it's another type of belief. He might believe, like, I don't believe in God, but everything he does kind of back deep down somewhere inside himself, he still believes in God. Maybe, he might say
he still believes that he's a victim.
Okay.
He's just not quite so sure of what he's a victim of now.
Maybe, yeah, the government or
right. Or the boss, or Whitey. I mean, there's a whole lot of different bosses out there.
Yeah, or the missus, or
Right, exactly.
So he's still a victim. That's the core thing. He's still a victim. If you're saying anything, if you're unhappy for any reason, really, you're a victim.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So that victimhood is the same no matter what anybody believes.
Yeah.
So whether they believe in anything or not is not the issue. It's an irrelevant topic.
Are they suffering or not? Yeah.
Right. They're both suffering. Can we come out of our suffering right in this very life? That's the question. And you can see that many Buddhists in Thailand actually rob themselves of asking the right question, because somehow or another they've got the idea of, oh, it's too hard to do now. Let me make some merit and I'll get out of my troubles next life. That's a very common belief. And I think that it actually is, is part of the mass propaganda. It's a very common belief.
I think the thing that's coming into my mind is it's almost like with money in the West. It's like almost like you believe you can buy your way out of anything. Like, you can, but you can't if you're suffering. If you feel it, if you're in the hell realms, you're feeling anxiety or any of this sort of stuff. It don't matter if you're a billionaire or you haven't got 1p. It doesn't really matter, does it? You can't buy yourself out of that. You can distract. Maybe you might buy some heroin or something and distract yourself, but you're going to come back. You're going to come back again, aren't you?
That I would say has been well known for a long time. The Buddha recommended that also, is to not apply or to try to gain monetary wealth. That the monks themselves were. A lot of people think that we're not allowed to handle money, and that's not true. It depends upon what we define money. But actually, the precept is jata rupa rajata patikahana. Patikahana means to receive. So jata rupa rajata is actually gold and silver specifically, and in bullion form, not coinage. That even the archaeology has proven that there was no coinage that was done in gold and silver, that it was all brass and copper and tin. They've dug it up. They know what it was. They've even found wooden coins. Even in the time of the Buddha, they had wooden nickels.
Well, I guess if you're coming at it from, like, I guess it would be a subset of, like, say, right livelihood. Again, the not handling money as a rights, rules, and regulations. If
you've got pocket change, that just makes things easy. If you've got a huge stash, now you've got to guard it.
It's true.
Okay. But in time, and you can see those. Here's an example of that, by the way. And we'll get on with it. But in Thailand, the law of the land, and this is a Buddhist country, they pride themselves on being Buddhist, and still the monks have to pay half price. Now, generally, the monks don't have any trouble finding somebody at the train station that's going to buy their half-price ticket for them. That's easy enough to do. But many of them don't. But they get the money someplace for the ticket. But the point that I'm making is that if the monks in Thailand were known to not be able to handle money as a rule, then the law would be that monks would travel free instead of half price. And yet a lot of people in the West think that, oh, the monks can't handle any money at all. No, they can handle a little bit. What is their limit? How much can they stand before they fall over in greed?
How big are the pockets on the robes? I guess.
Right. How big are your pockets? Exactly. Exactly. There are stories, and one of them is that after this old monk died, they went into his private quarters. Nobody had been in there in years, and the whole place was stacked with money. Absolutely stacked from floor to ceiling, mostly with 20 baht notes, which is the smallest baht note that they have in Thai, and also great big sacks of money. Except that when you looked at the coinage in there, much of it was already in a little plastic bag of its own. Because in Thailand, what they do is on birthdays, people will give, like on your 47th birthday, you will get 47 little bags of money, each one of them containing 47 baht. And you go out and give one bag of 47 baht to every monk until you've given 47 of them, and that's your birthday gift to the monks. And some of those monks will take that bag of money and just toss it over on the corner until finally they got to clean up.
Yeah.
And so here you got this old monk that he's got this whole place is absolutely loaded down with money, wound up being not that much. I mean, it was under $20,000, but oh, such a scandal. Instead of being really proud of him, he never spent any of that money. People gave it to him as gift, and he just put it there. He didn't care enough about it at all.
Because it's worthless to him, really. It doesn't mean it.
Exactly. Or he enough of it was enough.
Yeah. Just for the bus ride.
Mm-hmm. For the bus ride, or maybe he needs a new razor and he asks his buddy to go get it and he'll give him the money for it, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because most of the stuff is given anyway, and so there's very little that the monks need, but the people want to be generous. And it doesn't matter whether they believe in rebirth, they still want to be generous to the monks.
Makes them feel good.
Mm-hmm. And so belief in rebirth just is kind of irrelevant. But you can see where the value is that that's the way to control people. Is to tell them, if you're a runaway slave, if you run away, even if you don't get caught, you probably will, because we've got people up there. They're going to catch you and bring you back here, and we're going to beat the tar out of you. But even if you escape completely, you know that our God is going to come after you. And so that's the way that it's been all along, is this idea of this karma, is that you can't get away from us.
We spoke last time about this kind of fourth level of karma, didn't we?
Right.
Last time, I've been thinking about that. Like, I'm just trying to find my notes. So it's
the karma that is at the end of karma, which is the karma. I remember talking to you about that. Yes, it's so profound, this teaching of the Buddha, that we should have actions that are only useful in this present moment. And if we start behaving like that, we begin to behave less and less with future intentions.
Those roadblocks, highways. I've been thinking about this because it's sort of, I want to understand this. This is something to do with like the super mundane level, I guess.
This is super mundane.
And just thinking about it, and it's almost like the action to end action. And I guess, and sometimes, and I think it's a lot of this is to do with what you don't do rather than what you do. you know.
And what we do is often make a mess.
So just don't do. That's that roadblock in that highway. Just
Yeah, so we begin to restrain ourselves. That word is used fairly often in Buddhism, in the suttas, is that we have restraint. Here's an example of restraint, is that if someone is, let us say, decides that they're going to go on a diet,
Mhm.
the place to have that diet is at the grocery store. Why is that? Because there they will restrain themselves from purchasing that stuff and taking it home. Because it's easier to restrain one time at the store than it is to restrain ourselves every day
Yeah.
when we've got it at home.
Yeah.
So, this is what we mean by restraint. If we can restrain the senses in the way so that we're only looking at wholesome, then we don't have to filter out the unwholesome. So not only do we have thoughts that are wholesome, we begin to monitor where we go and what we do and that kind of stuff to keep everything wholesome.
Yeah.
And so we restrain our behaviors and actions and whatnot like that, being content with very little, which now means that there's even less to do.
Yeah.
And so this is the karma that brings the end of karma, is the karma of wisdom, of recognizing that, hey, if I'm not going to get any benefit out of it right now, what's the point of doing it?
That was one of the first things like I remember we ever spoke about, and it, I liked it because you said basically if you don't want anything, you kind of, no one can get you. You kind of, you can't be corrupted because you don't want anything anyway. Like that's that's
Isn't that brilliant?
yeah,
It's absolutely brilliant. It's really hard to con people who don't want anything.
because how are you going to get to them? What angle are you going to try to?
Exactly.
You know.
Playing on our emotions one way or the other. This is what it's all about, is propaganda, is to get us to really hate that or get us to really want this. And when we do that to a whole lot of people, you've got a revolution on your hands that perhaps you didn't need at all.
And that's why. So, what was one of the steps of anapanasati? Anapanasati is it Veda? I mean, it's been a long time since I looked into this, but but Vedapassana or something. Is that the right word?
Veda Nupassana is the feelings. Okay, if they cannot manipulate your feelings, they can't manipulate you.
Yeah. That's so cool, though, isn't it? That's so cool. There's so much going on all the time, with media and just everywhere, to sort of.
That's what sati is all about, is to wake up and look at how we're feeling, because how we're feeling may be in the process of being manipulated right now, or we're having thoughts about it that it was manipulated, manipulating it all over again.
And like you said in that talk with Guru Viking last night, you kind of, you learn these feelings as well, you learn, you learn from you copy your mum or your dad and how they dealt in a situation. And look, when my sister sort of cried like that one time, she got given the toy. So hey, maybe I'll cry like that this time,
And all I got was slapped.
yeah, well, 100%, yeah, that's right, yeah. That is a part of my conditioning. That's how it feels, actually. But I was the little shit. She was the angel. But that's another.
I know.
So.
And we wind up resenting that for a long time. And guess who's the one who has to deal with resentment now? Exactly.
Every time, it's funny. It's funny you say that because I don't see my parents very often. They live like an hour away. But it's funny how when you're back there, you're transported. These feelings that have kind of been latent, and they come back to the surface again, and all of a sudden you're back being 7 again, and in your parents' house, and the same dynamics and just the same stuff, like it's and then you come.
Part of the reason that they behave so much like they did is because they know that you expect that of them, and you do the same thing, and so everybody, it's almost like an unspoken rule that we can't be who we are now. We've got to pretend to be who we were back when.
Yeah, and you can.
And everybody does it, and everybody gets into the same war.
It's seductive, to step back into these roles, and it takes a lot of, let's say, presence of mind to catch yourself in the act and think, I'm 37 now.
Exactly.
I'm not 5,
exactly.
So
And this person in front of me is not my dad.
No.
Even though he thinks so.
Yeah,
and I'm going to meet this guy right where he is right now, not the way that I met him when I was 5.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, see him as a human being,
See him as a real human being right here, right now.
Rather than some.
Many times we do not want to do that. We want the parents to remain the way we remember them to be.
Like you said, it's an unwritten contract where you both played a role.
Mm-hmm.
You both got a role in this. Good mum, bad son, or I guess that's
whatever that old role was. We go right back into
it. Yeah. Unless, let's say, we take control, I guess, and we see that clearly and decide not to go down that path again. To be proud, I guess you're not in the here now, are you? When you're doing that, you've slid back 30 years or something, and you're not
exactly so.
You're not dealing with the reality right now. You're coming out from the history. It's in like a robot. It's gone to sleep again.
One thing's for sure, and that is that it's much, let us say, it's much beneficial for one to go into that and to have some Dhamma with them, have some Dhamma under the belt. If they're a Dhamma dude, they can handle that situation of going home a lot better.
It's a test, isn't it? You could see it as a challenge,
It is. It really is. And not only that, but it's quite insightful sometimes too to recognize what's going on, or how I can see in them now how things used to be precisely. I can see it now.
Yeah, 100%. And it breaks the spell, maybe,
That's right. And having that spell broken right in front of you is quite liberating to see those chains fall away.
Yeah, and you see exactly. I remember always idolizing my dad. He was Superman. And I kind of remember as you sort of growing up and seeing, that maybe he's not so great all the time.
And that's okay now. I don't have to hold him in that high ideal. He never met up to that anyway.
No.
That never was who he was. It was my idea of who he was. I don't. We all do that with our dad.
And when he was, going crazy and whatever, misbehaving quite badly, you could say that's when you could have some compassion and think that he was really scared back then. He was worried about losing his job, and he didn't know how to deal with it. He didn't have the skills to deal with it. So he wasn't.
Which gives you even more oomph to figure those things out for yourself.
Yeah.
That you can use his misery as your education.
Yeah. 100%.
And determination and enthusiasm to come out of that stuff.
Yeah.
You can break it in one generation.
Yeah. I believe that. I know. And then that way you are doing some good in the world as well,
Exactly so. Exactly so. We're not just surviving anymore.
No, you're
now we're living.
Yeah, you're kind of thriving and kind of turning a kind of negative into a positive, sort of transforming it, I guess,
Precisely. Or better still, leaving the positive and the negative as is, and dropping positive and negative. Instead of dwelling on the positive and hoping to get rid of the negative, get rid of it all and be satisfied with nurturing rather than criticism. It already is all good.
Yeah, and if
you don't have to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative. We don't have to do that. It's already just fine like it is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting you say that. I'll take that away and have some thought with that, because you automatically assume that you should be. I guess it's something to do with karma, that you accentuate the positive, But I guess that sometimes accentuating the positive is just smearing over the negative, glossing over.
Exactly. Exactly.
That yin yang symbol, it's in every the white bit's got a bit of black in it, and the black's got a bit of white in it, and it's sort of it will turn into its opposite eventually. Like love, if you can fall in love with someone and kind of hate them, it can go from love to hate when your expectations are kind of.
In the movies, it's backwards. They throw these two people together in combat or something, and they hate each other, and then after a while, they love each other in the movie. They don't go to the second part of it, and that's when after they fall in love with each other, now they start the war.
Yeah. You're not the person I thought you were, and it's because you were blind anyway. You didn't see it. You were blinded by the drug of love, like the oxytocin and the glamour and all this. Didn't see the fish hooks.
Exactly. Blind by the adrenaline, blind by the oxytocin, and now blind back by the adrenaline again.
Yeah. It's a cycle. Yeah.
And that's right. And so the thing to do is to get out of that cycle. And when you do, everything is beautiful. Everything is marvelous. We don't need that cycle. The problem is that it keeps going like that in that cycle. That's the samsara wheel that the Buddhist talks about. Get out of that thing.
Yeah, you're saying reality doesn't need that lipstick put on it. It's all right enough as it is.
Exactly.
Don't need to tart it up. Because if you were taking it all in, you would see it's all right anyway, just as it is. That the crack in the window, it's fine. It's
Exactly. Everything is all right. Everything is fine. This is the way to look at it, as opposed to I know what good is, and we're going to get it. You hear that difference? Everything is all right. Everything is fine. No worries. Versus I know what's good, and we're going to get it.
But that when you're saying that, I got images of like Christian evangelicals, for example, they're so, they're
their
good.
God has a war with it. I mean, the war of good and evil. That's the whole show. That's it. Having that war. Let's get out of that war. We don't need wars with gods and hell and devils.
Yeah, as well. Like the preacher, he's kind of, he says it with such fervor and such against I don't know, prostitution.
Oh, it's important.
He's talking about and prostitutes are evil and all this kind of stuff, and it turns out in the papers later that he was seeing some prostitutes. It's just it's the sort of he was.
Those red lights are sneaky.
But what I mean, though, yeah.
Well, Steve, I've really enjoyed our little conversation, and I really appreciate you having so much to say about the video that Steve and I did yesterday. I'm glad to hear that you're getting it. You're coming back into the groove. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's all there again. I'm happy as well, because I thought I'd kind of I'd led myself to believe that I'd screwed it all up and kind of forgotten it all. But it's not.
Never mind. Start again.
Exactly. It's just exactly everybody. That's the forgiveness. That's the forgiveness right there, isn't it? You've got another chance.
Yeah, I don't need to forgive myself. I can just forgive what I did wrong.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, you like there's a kind of because every moment is new. There's kind of the blessing.
Who was that dude anyway?
So kind of yeah. That really helped me what you said about that, because when we first started talking again, I sort of was coming from a place where I'd sort of messed up a little bit, sort of recently, and I can, with resolve, I can say I'm not going to do that again, and
exactly.
Then that is the forgiveness right there, It's can't change the past.
That resolution is the better forgiveness.
And it's a learning. It was a learning. If I hadn't learned it then, who knows what will happen down the line? Something worse.
Well, here you are now, and that's the important thing.
Yeah, I was seeking refuge. And as you said, I was, and that's the wisdom. I'm seeking that wisdom. Which is in here anyway. Yeah,
Exactly.
So okay, Dhamma.
Steve, we'll see you later. I'm
Yeah,
really glad to see you back again.
really nice to see you, Dhamma. So have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Yes, it's about that time, isn't it? Okay.
For you, yeah.
All right.
See you soon, Dhamma. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.